Good evening, you're watching One Voice, brought to you by Asia One. I'm Kerry Alexandra. Tonight we're looking again at the US-Iran conflict, at the reality behind the headlines, the power, pressure and political calculation of governments and military chiefs. Because despite weeks of missile exchanges, naval confrontations that have kept a critical trade route closed and impacted the global economy, continued military and naval build-up in the region, constant threats of escalation, ultimatums, deadlines to threats of wiping out an entire civilization overnight, and failed talks between Washington and Tehran, there now seems to be some signs that the United States and Iran may be moving towards some kind of limited understanding. What many analysts are calling a possible one-memo deal. And if that's the case, it raises questions. Because publicly, both Washington and Tehran continue to project strength, both governments insisting they remain prepared to respond militarily if necessary. But behind the scenes, there are reports of back-channel diplomacy continuing quietly between the two sides. Donald Trump has reportedly paused the catchily named Operation Project Freedom, the US naval mission launched to escort and rescue commercial ships stranded in the Strait of Hormuz, a move many observers interpret not as confidence but as caution, or even, dare I say it, compromise. Because after recent clashes between Iranian forces and US destroyers near the Strait of Hormuz, the White House appears increasingly aware of the very real risks and, let's face it, cost of a broader, longer war. According to Washington, Iran launched drones, missiles and attack boats towards American naval vessels in what the US called an unprovoked attack. I'd say that one's debatable, Donald. But Tehran unsurprisingly tells a very different story, frequently with Lego. Iran claims American forces targeted vessels entering the Strait of Hormuz and carried out attacks near Qasem Island, Bandar Kamir and Shirek. Iranian officials insist they simply responded to US aggression, targeting American destroyers near Chabahar and strategic naval positions in the Gulf. And while both sides are confidently claiming victory, what's striking tonight is not what's been said publicly, but what wasn't said. Because despite the exchange of fire, both Washington and Tehran appear to be being unusually careful not to trigger a full-scale war. CENTCOM insists the US does not seek wider conflict. Iranian state media says the situation has already returned to normal. Even President Trump himself attempted to downplay the confrontation, saying perhaps less diplomatically, "They trifled with us today, we blew them away." But in the very same breath, then confirming talks with Tehran are still ongoing. So what exactly is happening here? Is Washington genuinely pursuing diplomacy, or is this a continued attempt to use military pressure as political concessions? Critics argue the United States has long relied on a familiar strategy: escalate tensions, apply economic and military pressure, then negotiate from a position of dominance. We saw it in Iraq, we saw it in Libya, and we saw it in Afghanistan. And many now believe Iran is facing a similar playbook, because while Washington speaks of stability, the region remains on edge. Global shipping routes remain vulnerable, oil markets remain volatile, and once again, ordinary citizens across the Middle East and the wider region are left living under the shadow of a possible war and the uncertainty that that brings. So tonight we're asking, are we really looking at progress in the peace process between Washington and Tehran? Is the United States genuinely trying to prevent further conflict with Iran now, or is diplomacy simply being used as a strategic pause in a broader campaign of pressure and power games? Joining me tonight, former diplomat G.R. Baluch. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's get into it. There are increasing reports that Washington and Tehran may be moving towards some kind of limited understanding behind closed doors. But given the continued military tensions, how credible is genuine diplomacy at this point? Is this a real effort to de-escalation, or is it just political theatre designed to buy time and manage optics, do you think?
No, I don't think so. I think that things have the momentum pretty far. And the reasons are that there is what I always call the drivers of the conflict and the pressures for the peace. So I believe now the pressure for peace is much more than the drivers for the conflict, which I'll just enumerate some for US and some for Iran. For the US, I think the pressure for peace is that there's a huge disruption in the global supply chain that is impacting the entire supply chain, including petroleum products, the fertilizer, the helium, sulfur, and the industry is being impacted, right from sophisticated chips to normal farmer in Africa and Asia. Number one. Number two, the energy market volatility has completely kind of played havoc with the stock markets and by itself. In fact, the aviation industry all over the world has suffered. Even in US, a big airline like a Spirit had to ground thousands of flights and they had to cancel it. And they say that when the losses are really calculated, it will be billions of dollars. So each day lost is costing billions of dollars to the aviation industry. And then, most importantly, the Gulf markets, the Gulf countries themselves, their economies were based on tourism, on oil. So they are losing billions of dollars every day, every hour, actually, every minute that we speak. So any delay in the finalization of the peace is any one missile would put down the market many figures down. And also it's about the perception. See, the entire system of ecosystem of the Gulf countries were based on a perception of being a island of prosperity, luxury, stability, security, and investment. But that all is gone. So is the case. And that was the perception which has been completely damaged. If they cannot restore it quickly enough, it can really be almost like a permanent damage to their economies, which are not only oil based. Yes, that is the major income, but their lifestyle, their whole entire market ecosystem was based on this perception. So any misperception would turn away the investors, it will turn away the expatriate community, they turn away those techno experts which had come to feel Dubai or Abu Dhabi as their home, or Qatar and other places. So I think that is another pressure on the US. I think the other most important is the forthcoming visit of the US president to China. It's very important for the US President Trump to carry this confidence to Moscow when he meets Mr. Xi, that well, he undertook a campaign and sort of got a victory as he pretends to believe. And if he's not able to sign some kind of a paper, some MOU of some kind, he would be in a much weaker position to talk to China. And also, it's very interesting, it's paradoxical, but that's how some of the analysts, they believe that same is the case with Iran. Iran thinks that if they do not sign a peace, some kind of a MOU, and this peace is still pending, there could be a understanding between the two great powers to impose a peace, which may not really suit them. So I think they also have a urgency or a need or a pressure to do that. And then also, you see, there are two other things: the domestic public pressure and the international public pressure. The international sympathy wave, which has been created by brutal attacks on Iran by Israel and America, causing thousands of casualties. Now the figure is up to about 5,000. And of course, the physical infrastructure is in billions of dollars. They put it to $270 billion. So that sympathy wave can go if the perception is created that it is Iran which is holding back the peace process. So I think, and of course, the people back home and their domestic audience wants this conflict to end, and they want to start their normal life. So I think both the parties, warring parties, have a pressure for peace rather than any drivers for continuing the conflict. Yeah.
Trump insists America wants peace, but at the same time, US naval forces remain heavily deployed in the Gulf. So is this Washington truly pursuing diplomacy or using military pressure to force Iran into concessions, do you think?
No, that's a normal strategy that both the parties, they do that. Of course, we know that US has a preponderance in terms of naval power. So, and that has been the strategy of the US, and especially Mr. Trump. He brings his decades of experience to negotiate under pressure and put pressure on the other side, and get a what he calls the good deal. So I think he is looking for that kind of a good deal. But at the same time, Iranian, by showing this aggressiveness and kind of proactively responding to the US, and including these firings that we heard today, tit for tat, both the sides, is that they don't want to come under pressure. So I think both are playing this game, if you will. So trying to see who will blink first. I think none of them will blink. Hopefully, it will be only the wisdom. It will only be rational choice that both will make for their own people and for the people of the world, and they hopefully would give peace a chance, because they do not have option for war. That will be too devastating for the region and for the world. Yeah.
Let's hope so. Donald Trump's reported decision to pause Operation Project Freedom has raised eyebrows internationally, the more optimistic saying it's a responsible step towards de-escalation, critics saying rather it reflects growing concern inside Washington about the risks of further confrontation. So does this pause really tell us about America's position right now? What do you think it says?
Yeah, definitely. I think it was a transition from, as they said, that the epic fury was ended. Of course, there was a need for them domestically to avoid the congressional sanction, but at the same time, putting a pause to the Project Freedom. I think it was on the insistence of our Gulf friends, and of course, Pakistan did play a role in persuading the US to pause it, because that was creating not a conducive environment for peace negotiations to continue. In fact, it started to create more tension, because it created yet another dynamics. So, because if they were to interdict ships, same will be done by Iran. So we end up again into tit for tat firing or interception of the ships. So for peace process to proceed, I think you need calm at the waters. The Gulf has to be calm to really achieve peace that we all strive to achieve.
As we've discussed on previous programmes, many in the region point to a long history of US intervention in the Middle East and the wider region, from Iraq to Afghanistan to Libya. And critics argue Washington often frames military pressure as security policy. So are we just witnessing the early stages of another cycle of American interventionism, this time directed towards Iran?
See now, yeah, I think we all have been examining whether it is continuation of the same doctrine which was given by Netanyahu to US to create a ring of dysfunctional states around it, because ultimately it thinks that there have to be two sets of states which should define its neighborhood, because it's about Israel. Let's face it. Now we can't hide from this reality, the geostrategic reality of the American policy in the Middle East. It was oil, but no more. I think it's more now the security of Israel. So, and Israel has now this idea, rather than creating a neighborhood which is friendly and conducive with which Israel could live for centuries to come. It thinks that it can live with hegemony, it can live with militant and militarized kind of relationship with them, by way of either completely destroying those states the way it did to Syria, what it did to Iraq in collaboration with the US, and perhaps that is what they thought they could do it to Iran. But the implications of doing the same, using the same formula for Iran may not work out. One, that it's a very, very solid state and a nation state. Actually, it is what we call a civilizational state with about 7,000 years of history. So I don't think they can so easily undo this state. Yes, those states are the result of the First World War, as we always say, Skype packet agreement, or the Second World War British mandate created states. But Iran is not that. Iran has been there with, of course, varying borders. But this core, which is in Tehran, Isfahan, and all these places, they have been there for not centuries, for millennia actually. So I don't think this will work. And if they try it again, I'm sorry, that the consequence is going to be very, very bad. I hope that US would not again fall into the trap of militant warmonger regime in Tel Aviv. Yep.
Technically, the ceasefire has been between the United States and Iran has been in place now since the 7th of April. But despite that, there's continued to be flare-ups, naval incidents and strikes that both sides say are retaliatory. So realistically, how stable is this ceasefire? And are both sides genuinely committed to avoiding prolonged war, or are they simply preparing for the next confrontation, do you think?
Well, yeah, I think they are preparing for a peaceful resolution. But what it indicates two things: one, that U.S. keeps the option of fighting, and paradoxically, Iran is also not ruling out that there would be a war again. There have been statements, and also the very fact that they are able to resist, continue to resist, they continue to retaliate. It means they have still enough war capacity left in them, enough of missiles, enough of drones, enough of boats. So I think the U.S.-Israeli attack, or 40 days of air bombing, which was brutal, has not been able to completely deplete the fighting capacity of Iran. So there is a potential for war. I think, as the realist, I would say that. But as I said, incentive for peace are much more than the drivers for war. So hopefully we'll see that Pakistan's sincere efforts, as the Iranian foreign minister said, gracious efforts would inshallah succeed, and we'll see peace, in fact the dawn of peace really, from Islamabad, inshallah. Again, they'll be meeting in Islamabad. That's my wish and that's my prayer, that we should become the harbingers of world peace and global peace and the regional peace. Yeah.
And a final question: if talks between Tehran and Washington are indeed continuing quietly behind the scenes, what is the US's objective here? Is Washington now seeking some kind of coexistence with Iran, or further regime change, strategic containment, or just trying to maintain the long-term control over the balance of power in the Middle East?
I think all of it, what you said. I think the objective is not to now pursue that hypothetical dream of regime change, not at all. But what they want to do probably is to bring back the region to some kind of a normalcy, which it will take time to do that. The confidence has been, but at the same time, I think they want to have a sustainable, at least a framework to build a relationship which is not confrontational, not adversarial. It is normal. They can contain they can keep some kind of a channel of communication with each other. And also that this requires that the regional countries now have to come together and find out, work out a framework of coexistence. Especially for the GCC countries, is important that they have to find a way out to coexist with Iran, despite their ideological...
Jiyar Baloch, I have to say thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's been really useful unpacking this. The Strait of Hormuz may appear calm tonight, but beneath the surface of the ceasefire, the tensions remain because many questions remain unanswered and conflicts of interest unresolved. For hundreds of years, from the Great Game era and even before to the present, the Middle East has lived through cycles of escalation, foreign intervention, geopolitical rivalries and spheres of influence, and time after time, those foreign powers insist their actions are about security and regional stability. But things don't look very stable right now. Thank you for watching our series exploring the US and Iran conflict here on OneVoice. I'm Kerry Alexandra. Good night.